I want to talk about Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and her strategy around getting a pipeline to the West Coast, particularly the political fight she's having with BC and the approach she's taking and her support from her proxies and people within her government. So a couple of days ago, she called BC Premier David Eby un-Canadian and parochial, which even saying that is the fact that she said it was un-Canadian. And you can see the comments I made on my October 7th video. Then she followed up the next day with more unflattering comments. She's got a rhetorical style that she's perfected since she was last in politics in around 2012, 15 years ago, where she can say the most outrageous things, but she says it in a very moderate tone. She says the tone sounds reasonable. Doesn't matter what she's saying. The fact that she's being, unkind, the fact that she's being over the top, the fact that she's fibbing and telling you incorrect information is irrelevant. The tone persuades people. And so this is kind of how she's approached the fight with Eby. Here's a problem with this. Her followers, her proxies, the folks on social media and who are making this argument in the electronic and newspaper media and newspapers are not like that. And they're very rabid. And Mark Twain used to talk about taking broadswords to butterflies. So if you want to catch a butterfly, you have to take a very fine net and you have to be very careful and sneak up on them and kind of scoop them up. You've got a little subtlety in it. On the other hand, if you take a broadsword, one of those big swords that, from years ago, crusaders used to wield, and you go out and you start swinging at the butterfly, you're not going to get the butterfly. And this is, in effect, the rhetorical approach that the Alberta government is taking to British Columbia, as it has in other political fights. It's always taking the broadsword to butterflies. And I've said many times, and I'll keep saying it, former Alberta Premier, political icon in Alberta, talked about the importance of statesmanship, building political alliances, getting support from different groups, and getting them on your side to exert political pressure so that you get what you want. This is how you do things in a confederation like Canada. It's not the way Smith and her political supporters do it. And it's inevitable that there was going to be a fight between BC and Alberta. You remember the last time, the Trans Mountain expansion, and in late 2015, then NDP Premier in Alberta, Rachel Notley, introduced the Climate Leadership Plan. And when Justin Trudeau of the Liberals became Prime Minister in the fall of 2016, she used that Climate Leadership Plan as leverage with Trudeau to get a promise around two new pipelines, the Line 3 expansion and the construction of the Trans Mountain expansion to the West Coast, terminates in Burnaby. She got Trudeau on side, solidly on side. And then when the inevitable fight with British Columbia, which is ironic because in 2017, John Horgan and the NDP government came to power in BC. And so you had two NDP premiers going at it hammers and tongs. There was the infamous, the wine battle. There was a threat from Alberta. They passed legislation that would allow them to shut off the pipelines to BC if it came to that. Horgan tried to pass a law that tried to regulate the flow of bitumen in pipelines once it got to BC, which is struck down because, of course, that's unconstitutional. It's only the federal government that can do that. And this is the point. At the end of the day, as Trans Mountain showed us, the federal government and the federal government alone has the authority to make these decisions. It can override the BC government. It can override First Nations. It can override municipalities. It makes the decision. So clever Notley got the federal government to back her. And now we have a 590,000 barrel a day pipeline that mostly will serve, well, either California or Asia. That's not what Smith is doing. And I've got a couple of quotes from her supporters. So this is Rob Anderson, who's the executive director of the Premier's office, and it's the same as being a chief of staff. Here's what he tweeted. Team Canada, my ass. Your comments, Premier, meaning Eby, represent far more of a threat to national unity than Donald Trump has ever been. That's extraordinary. I mean, we all remember, back in January, February, March, when Trump was threatening, to annex Canada, to beat our economy into submission with tariffs, etc. I'm sorry, David Eby opposing a pipeline to his coast is worse than that, because that's over the top. Broadsword to butterfly. And this is exactly, where did they learn this? This is the rhetorical style, the political style of Trump and the MAGA movement in the United States. And the Maple MAGA, the convoy crowd, the freedom crowd, the anti-vaxxers, the anti-maskers, the anti-ostrich culling crowd, the Maple MAGA in Canada. It's the same broadswords to butterflies. Here's another one from David Knight-Legg, who was the former CEO of Invest Alberta and has been associated with the UCP government on Twitter again, X, sorry. He called Eby a virtue signaling lefty putz. And he suggested that Alberta might want to shut off a couple pipelines, and starve the Vancouver International Airport of fuel. So, ground planes for a couple of days. Again, broadswords to butterflies. It's this over-the-top language. Now, I give you two examples, and I talked about, what Smith is saying, but it's all over the place. It's all over social media, these, Alberta proxies who are supporting the push for a pipeline. And instead of fostering a dialogue, a conversation, instead of Smith going to British Columbia and meeting with groups and, maybe Indigenous communities, starting to build political support within BC, even if they're, those groups decide that they're ultimately opposed to the pipeline. They've been heard, they've been seen, they've talked to the Premier, they've talked to other Alberta, representatives. All of that, at the end of the day, will build some political support for if there is a pipeline proposal, as Smith has promised for the spring of 2026, that the federal government will have her back. But if she pushes too hard and the fight with BC ruptures political relations between the two provinces, will Prime Minister Mark Carney continue to support any kind of an idea, support a pipeline to the West Coast? I would argue probably not. I mean, he's likely to get far more seats in BC than he ever will in Alberta. And it will be a Smith who will have, by her conduct, her refusal to employ Lougheed's statesmanship, her taking a broadsword to butterflies, that will have made it impossible for Carney to invoke the constitutional jurisdiction that the federal government has, exercise it, and get the pipeline built. And it'll be Smith's fault because she didn't do her politics well. And that's the thing. I've said in the past, and I think I'm wrong now that that she's actually very politically canny. But when push comes to shove, she's a bully. She's a thug, and her supporters are bullies and thugs. And bullies and thugs may have some successes early on, but ultimately they aren't successful. They lose. And I would say that if she continues and her supporters continue this political assault on BC, that's going to be the end result. And now, Energy Media, I have to say this, it's a caveat every time I do this kind of a video, we oppose the pipeline too, but we do it for economic reasons. We argue that peak oil demand is coming and there isn't going to be enough oil demand in Asia to support a pipeline. And there won't be enough demand in Europe either. So, a new pipeline would be in danger of becoming a stranded asset. That's an economic argument. It's a technology argument because of clean energy technology displacing oil demand. And we can have a conversation about that, a very rational conversation. But if we're going to be doing it in politics, if that's how Alberta is going to approach this, the chances are it's going to backfire and they're going to lose the very thing that they're trying to achieve. Put away the broadsword, Premier Smith. Remember Peter Lougheed's injunction. Practice statesmanship. If you don't, you're going to lose this battle.